For those of you who are familiar with Aastrom, and I've been following the company for years, Aastrom has been involved in many different areas and is still very predominant in the cardiology space, but the company has gone through a transformation in the last year, acquiring a cell therapy business, really Genzyme's old Carticel business. Had a very exciting earnings call yesterday, very strong fourth quarter numbers. And the real question, going forward is where will this company go in the future? Or we're going to talk a little bit, I assume, about knee repair and about burns. And we're also going to talk about ixmyelocel, the cardiac program, and when we might get data. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Not all. Thank you. How is he advancing slides? There it is.
Yes,
all
right
there. Just as a note, this presentation includes forward-looking statements. Please look to our filings for a more complete risk assessment in our SEC filings. The transformation you speak of really started with personnel. The entire leadership team is different. Our CEO, Nick Colangelo, had previous CEO experience as well as leading Lilly Ventures. Our CMO was the Senior Vice President of Clinical Sciences at Takeda Global. That was our CMO, excuse me. Our CSO was Vice President of Biology and Cell Biology at Genzyme. And our CFO worked at a couple public companies, most recently NPS and Biodel. So the entire team, including myself, I came from 20 years plus between Abbott and Takeda, and worked in BD for a couple years before joining Aastrom. So the entire team is new within the last couple years. We also added a few new board members, Steve Gilman, CSO from Cubist recently. We also added a couple others as well. Steve, I'm sorry, I'm just going to make sure I have his name. Kevin McLaughlin, who was the CFO at Acceleron, and then Paul Wooten, who's CEO at Okada. So a big transformation at Aastrom, and it's not just in the name. We had to do some restructuring of the legacy program at Aastrom and focused on our DCM program, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but it's an orphan indication for patients with advanced heart failure. Once we did that, we looked for strategic investments, and fortunately, we had just hired Ross Toubeau, who had brought to market the CTRM products that we purchased from Sanofi. And those products delivered $44 million in 2013 in revenue. We immediately, within 2 weeks, took to restructuring that business, and I'll share with you that it's been accretive minus restructuring costs right from the start. We have a couple phase 3 or a couple products in development, one in phase 3 and one in phase 2 that I'll highlight. We just had a fantastic equity raise in September with $40 million raised, and Gerard just did a great job on that, and I'll share with you who participated in that raise. Just quickly, we purchased the CTRM business for $6.5 million. We acquired worldwide rights to several products. Carticel is an autologous cell therapy. You take a biopsy from a patient, it takes us a few weeks. It goes back in a solution. Physicians have to inject it under a periosteal flap. It's only indicated in the United States, or approved in the United States, and it's been around for some 20 years. Epicel is also an autologous therapy for patients with a greater than 30% burn. Typically, it's over 60%. It's a life-saving therapy. We get a postage stamp of skin, and within 3 weeks, we can supply enough autografts to cover an entire body. It is approved as an HDE device. We have just recently asked for a meeting to discuss with the agency a formal pediatric indication. The original data that we submitted for Epicel included about 30% of pediatric patients, and use year in and year out is in about 30% of pediatric patients. Why is that important? Because if you get a specific indication for pediatrics under the humanitarian use device exemption, we would be able to charge a profit for this product. Currently, we can only charge R&D, distribution, and manufacturing costs. MACI is basically Carticel at the end of the production. It's seeded onto collagen matrix that was licensed from a company called Vericel. And we settled the Vericel milestones that were associated with the U.S. We have already approached and requested a meeting with the FDA to figure out how to package the data that Sanofi and Genzyme had prepared for a BLA submission. And we want to talk to the agency about how to best move forward with this data. Understand that it was on a phase 3 trial that was conducted in Europe, so we need to get the FDA's opinion before we move forward.
So Dan, before we move ahead, I'd like to just dwell on this slide for a minute. Carticel, Epicel, and MACI, you know, to me on the surface sound like great products. And for sure, you know, the idea of a burn graft product, Epicel, is life-saving. Why was it that Genzyme and then Sanofi Aventis and all of their power and all of their pharmaceutical might, you know, was unable to get traction with these products? And help us understand, you know, how you believe now this new company, Vericel, you know, which is obviously laser focused on you know, building this up. How can you succeed where they could not?
First of all, it's perspective, right? It's $44 million in revenue in 2013. For it to be a significant move the needle in a Sanofi world, it would have to be 500 million plus. For us, we can cost effectively grow this business where Sanofi I'm not saying that they couldn't, but they weren't interested in doing it. They had stopped peer-to-peer education programs. We've invested a great deal. We're going to reach over 1,000 orthopedic physicians and staff this year, and we've just geared up our peer-to-peer programming. So we do expect to grow both top line, and we're investing in fairly obvious improvements in bottom line, where for whatever reason they weren't. Ross Toubeau, our CSO, both brought these products through development and got them approved, and he's identified several areas where we can improve the bottom line manufacturing of these products. So it is focus, it is effort. I don't think it's rocket science. I've worked on billion-dollar products at both Takeda and Abbott, and there are some basics to promotion and activity and key opinion leaders, and also making sure that the payer system is in line. We have good coverage for both Carticel and Epicel, but making sure that the PO process or that the prior authorization process is smooth for physicians as well. So we've invested there.
Do you see more potential in Carticel or in Epicel, you know, in terms of market penetration and kind of future growth rate? It strikes me that Carticel and maybe MACI a little bit, and you just had some good news on MACI, but that's a little bit more of a mature market where Epicel seems like it's a new market.
Yeah, I think the most exciting is based on the market research that Sanofi had done before we purchased it, is MACI, just because the surgery that's associated with Carticel is an open arthrotomy. It's a mini arthrotomy, so it's less invasive for MACI. There's more physicians interested in potentially doing that. We're doing some research with MACI to see if it can be delivered through a arthroscopy as well, that would open up the market tremendously. So I would say of these, the big potential is MACI. Epicel was dying on the vine. They had one representative promoting it. We added two immediately. Those two representatives had such good response that we've added a fourth just recently. We don't think we need large sales forces to promote these products, but they do have to be present and you know, a constant dialogue with target physicians.
And one question I have
Sure.
for you is, can a burn patient wait the 6 weeks or?
Yes, you know, not every burn patient. It depends on the total body surface area that's burned, but typically they'll cover a patient with an allograft, and or use available skin that they can use as an autograft to get a patient stable and stop any dehydration before Epicel is ready.
And then kind of sets the stage for them to have their own autologous graft back.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
thank
right.
you. All right,
So quickly, how did we, you know, take this CTRM business and drive it to what we believe potentially is long-term profitability? This business has been accretive, minus the restructuring costs since we bought it. The first thing we did was we shut down the Denmark facility. MACI was losing $7 million in Europe. It was only contributing 1% of revenue. The study that was done in Europe was supplied from Cambridge. So we temporarily suspended MACI in Europe. We have a 3-year window to reintroduce MACI without having to go through the full you know, authority process to get approval. We can manufacture in Cambridge and supply the states or the countries that make sense in Europe. We also, Sanofi had done all the R&D work and the majority of the BLA filing work for MACI. So we were able to cut out that cost quickly. We also reduced the footprint of the entire operation in the United States, reducing that by $4 million. And cutting total FTEs or positions by 80. So when we bought the business, it was about 240 positions. It's now 160. Add in Ann Arbor, and we're up to about 190 positions. And as I shared, we settled with the Vericel shareholders for MACI, which gives us a clean slate in the U.S., no milestones. I'll just share this was our fourth quarter earnings, as well as for the 7 months that we've owned it. The fourth quarter revenues increased by 13%, 9% over the 7 months that we've owned it. Gross margins improved to 54% for Q4 and 40% for those 7 months. We think we've got enough money in the bank, unless we do some kind of strategic transaction or have to invest in an unforeseen larger trial. We have enough money in the bank now to become profitable. Last thing I'll note is we've completed the enrollment of ixmyelocel-T for our orphan indication in ischemic dilated cardiomyopathy. It's an excellent primary endpoint here, which is MACE plus, which will give us a definitive answer after the end of Q1 2016 on how to best proceed. It gives us options if this is a positive result.
So, you know, one of the things that I've always believed about ixmyelocel is, what's better, homogeneous or heterogeneous? Homogeneous one cell type or a mixture of cell types? And in nature and in biology, a mixture always seems to work better than any one thing based on mechanism of action. And then you get into, well, if it's a mixture, is it a optimized mixture? And you know, if you're in the optimized heterogeneous camp, then I had believed, and you know, I'm going back 5 years, that Aastrom kind of owns that landscape. So I'm very intrigued to see what this data suggests, but it also strikes me, given how quickly the landscape is moving. Yeah. Mesoblast is now in a pivotal trial. Neostem just completed a phase 2 autologous trial. They're moving forward. Athersys is about to report phase 2 data in stroke. will you be able to move this program forward on your own, or are you going to look for a partner? And given how quickly the competitive landscape is moving, does this program make sense at this company anymore?
So first of all, it's fully recruited, so we can wait and get our data and answer some of the questions that you're posing here. Number one. Number two, we're going to get a strong signal here on whether the product works or not, because the primary outcome is MACE plus heart failure treated outside the hospital. One of the frustrations, and I can say this having done BD work in my prior life, that looking at, trying to read tea leaves of poorly designed phase 2 studies is just very frustrating. Love the way this is designed. If we get a significant signal here, it will draw a question as to some of the questions you're asking on cell type, as well as allogeneic versus autologous. So we're going to need a strong signal to move forward. We might do it ourselves. We might do it with a partner. It's hard to say.
So we're going to be looking for growth in the core business.
Yep.
And then we know that we have a data point coming up in first quarter 2016. And at this point, it's a story of execution.
Story of execution and hopefully good regulatory news, potentially, on MACI and Epicel. And we've got a great group of investors behind us, and we're really pleased with the last round of financing.
Dan, thanks for joining us this
Thank you.
afternoon and sharing the presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you.